The city of Avdiivka, a name etched onto the war map of Ukraine, had been a frontline bastion since 2014, for nearly a decade. It endured an almost daily barrage of shelling, a testament to its resilience. Following the fall of Bakhmut in May 2023, the Donetsk front settled into a grim stalemate. The battlefield became a landscape of static trench lines where territorial gains were measured in meters, not kilometers. For Ukraine, this period was marked by an increasingly severe shortage of artillery ammunition as the flow of Western military aid began to decelerate. Conversely, for Russia, the prolonged deadlock demanded a decisive breakthrough. A clear, tangible victory was needed to shift the momentum of the conflict. In this context, Avdiivka emerged not merely as a military target, but as a critical objective with profound political and psychological implications. It was a prize that could redefine the entire Donbass front. The strategic significance of Avdiivka was multifaceted, built upon four pillars of value. First was its location. Situated a mere 10 kilometers from the center of Donetsk's city, the regional capital under Russian control, Avdiivka served as a direct observation post and a firing position that threatened key Russian logistical and command centers. It was a thorn in the side of the Donetsk administration, a constant reminder of the proximity of the front. Second was its long-standing defense. Over 8 years, the city and its surroundings had been transformed into one of the most formidable fortified zones in Ukraine. A labyrinthine network of multi-layered trenches, concrete bunkers, and underground shelters. Built and improved since 2014, made it a bastion designed to withstand a prolonged siege. The third critical factor was logistics. Avdiivka's position allowed Ukrainian forces to control the northern routes into Donetsk, effectively constraining Russian operational movements in the area. It functioned as the northern anchor of the entire Ukrainian defensive line in the region, a linchpin holding the front together. Its fall would not just be a local loss, but would risk unhinging the stability of defenses for dozens of kilometers. Finally, there was the powerful symbolism. For Kyiv, holding Avdiivka was a potent declaration that the fight for Donetsk was not over. It signified that Ukrainian sovereignty, however contested, still had a foothold near the heart of the Donbass. For Moscow, its capture would represent a major step in securing the Donetsk region and would send a demoralizing signal that Ukraine's western defense line was beginning to fracture. On October 10, 2023, the Russian military command initiated its largest offensive operation in the Donetsk sector since the battle for Bakhmut. The assault on Avdiivka began with a massive display of force. Hundreds of tanks and armored fighting vehicles were committed to the battle, signaling an intent to achieve a rapid and decisive outcome. The initial tactic was a classic pincer movement, a maneuver designed for a swift breakthrough. Columns of armor advanced from the north and south of the city, aiming to encircle the Ukrainian garrison and force a quick surrender. The objective was clear: to avoid a protracted, bloody urban fight by cutting off the fortress from all support. However, the initial phase of the offensive met with catastrophic failure. The advancing Russian armored columns drove into a meticulously prepared kill zone. They were systematically targeted and destroyed by a combination of anti-tank guided missiles, pre-sighted artillery, dense minefields, and a swarm of first-person view drones operated with lethal precision by Ukrainian defenders. Footage from the battlefield showed fields littered with the burning wrecks of tanks and armored personnel carriers. The initial high-intensity assaults were halted within days. Russian forces sustaining exceptionally high losses in materiel and personnel, Avdiivka did not fall as Moscow had anticipated. The fortress had held, forcing a fundamental reassessment of Russian strategy. Faced with the failure of their initial armored thrusts, Russian commanders shifted their approach in November and December of 2023. The battle for Avdiivka transitioned from a war of maneuver to a brutal war of attrition, a grinding contest of firepower and endurance. The new tactic mirrored the methodology used in Bakhmut, but on an even more destructive scale. Instead of large-scale mechanized assaults, Russian forces began attacking in small, dismounted infantry clusters, methodically storming one fortified position at a time. Each assault was preceded by an overwhelming wave of bombardment. Artillery and most devastatingly heavy glide bombs were employed with extreme intensity, pulverizing Ukrainian defenses. The FAB 500 and FAB-1500 bombs, launched from aircraft outside the range of Ukrainian air defenses, systematically obliterated the concrete bunkers and trench systems that had stood for years. After each deluge of fire, infantry units would advance to seize the cratered ground. For the Ukrainian defenders, the situation became increasingly desperate. They defended with resilience and ingenuity, but they were fighting an uneven battle. The severe shortage of artillery shells meant they could no longer effectively counter the Russian bombardment or break up attacking formations. They became heavily reliant on a finite supply of FPV drones and the sheer determination of their light infantry. The battle devolved into a relentless meat grinder. Avdiivka was rapidly becoming a second Bakhmut, but the circumstances were far more unfavorable for Ukraine. The disparity in firepower was growing wider by the day, and the once impregnable fortress was being systematically dismantled by overwhelming aerial and artillery supremacy. The turning point in the battle occurred between late December 2023 and early January 2024. After weeks of methodical, grinding assaults, Russian forces succeeded in capturing key high ground surrounding the city, particularly the massive spoil heap of the Avdiivka coke plant. From these commanding positions, they were able to bring Ukraine's last remaining supply line under direct and continuous fire control. The main road into the city, known as Route 0542, became a corridor of death. This tactical success triggered a cascade of critical problems for the Ukrainian garrison. Troop rotations became nearly impossible, meaning exhausted soldiers were trapped on the front lines for extended periods. The evacuation of wounded personnel became a perilous and often fatal undertaking. Inside the city, the fortifications that had once offered protection were being destroyed layer by layer by the penetrating power of the glide bombs. The multi-layered defenses were breached, and the fighting moved into the shattered urban districts. What was once a fortress had transformed into a suffocating fire pocket. Ukrainian soldiers found themselves trapped in destroyed basements, cut off from supplies, reinforcement, and medical aid. The strategic advantage had decisively shifted. The ability of the defenders to hold out was no longer a question of will, but of logistical and physical possibility. The noose around Avdiivka was tightening, and the collapse of the defense was becoming inevitable. By mid-February 2024, the tactical situation within Avdiivka had become untenable. The Ukrainian command, facing the imminent threat of a complete encirclement that would trap thousands of soldiers, made a difficult but necessary decision. The order was given for a general withdrawal from the city. Priorities shifted from defending territory to preserving the lives of the remaining forces. On February 17, 2024, Russian forces raised their flag over the city administration building, signifying their complete control over Avdiivka. The withdrawal was not a clean or orderly collapse. It was a chaotic and hazardous retreat conducted under extreme duress. As Ukrainian units attempted to pull back through the narrow, shell-racked corridors, they were relentlessly pursued and attacked. While many units successfully broke out of the closing pocket, they suffered heavy losses in the process. The fall of Avdiivka was a bitter end to a brutal, 4-month-long battle. In assessing the campaign's outcome, both sides could claim a measure of success, yet both paid an exorbitant price. For Russia, the capture of Avdiivka represented its most significant tactical victory on the battlefield since the fall of Bakhmut nearly a year earlier. It achieved the primary objective of pushing Ukrainian forces back from the outskirts of Donetsk's, enhancing the security of the regional capital. However, this victory was purchased with staggering casualties in both personnel and armored vehicles. Losses that will have a lasting impact on the offensive capability of the units involved. For Ukraine, the loss of Avdiivka was a severe blow. It forfeited a crucial fortress that had anchored its defensive line in the Donbass for a decade. Yet, by prolonging the battle for over 4 months, Ukrainian forces inflicted disproportionate losses on the attacking Russian army and significantly slowed the momentum of Russia's winter offensive. The defense of Avdiivka did not cause the collapse of the Donbass front, but it undeniably tipped the balance of power further in Moscow's favor. The battle for Avdiivka underscored a stark reality of modern industrial warfare, will and fortifications. While crucial, cannot indefinitely compensate for a profound deficit in ammunition and logistical support. The overwhelming Russian advantage in artillery and aerial bombs was the decisive factor that ultimately broke the back of the Ukrainian defense. In the aftermath of the city's fall, Russia gained significant psychological momentum, demonstrating its ability to leverage its material superiority to achieve concrete territorial gains. Ukraine, in turn, was forced into a difficult and costly process of restructuring its defenses along a new, less prepared line. The war entered a more challenging phase for Kyiv, defined by a need to conserve forces and cede ground in the face of relentless pressure. Avdiivka had fallen, but its capture raised a larger, more ominous question that now hangs over the entire front line. Where will the next fortress be, and will it be able to hold?